Here's what we got on tap for today's show. We're going to check out the latest trade buzz out there in the NFL and how that might impact the Broncos. Plus, they made a signing. They went out and got a wide receiver. No, it's not quite a Tim Patrick replacement, but we'll be breaking all that down. Plus, we have some injury updates from training camp. But first, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Help us reach 9,000 subscribers. We're just under 600 away. So if you're looking for a Broncos channel for the 2022 season, you found the right spot. Hit that sub button. Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Matthew Peterson. We got a fun show planned out for everyone today. We're going to round up the latest news coming out of training camp on the injury front, keep you guys well informed on that side of things. Plus, the Broncos made a signing after Tim Patrick went down. George Paton went out and found another wide receiver. And then we're going to end today's show with an interesting trade idea I came across and I wanted to float it your guys' way. But the Broncos made a signing for a household name, Darrius Shepherd. Yep, the North Dakota State product who played with the Chiefs to start his career. Last 2 seasons, he was up in the frozen tundra with Green Bay. And no surprise here, he has a connection to the Broncos. That tends to be how these things work out. When teams are in a bit of a pinch and they want to just bring someone in for training camp, they tend to go with someone they're a little bit familiar with. And head coach Nathaniel Hackett and new offensive coordinator Justin Outen, they have a connection with Shepherd, who was with the Packers the last 2 seasons. He was not a contributor. This is not a move to try and replace Tim Patrick. No, this is simply we are short wide receivers in training camp. Tyrie Cleveland got hurt. We need bodies, and we're going to bring someone who we know something about. So that's really what this means here. Now, I think Mike Klis also echoed a lot of similar thoughts I'd like to share with you guys. Wide receiver Darrius Shepherd was signed not just because of Tim Patrick's ACL injury, but also Kendall Hinton and Tyrie Cleveland are down per the source. Cleveland suffered cartilage damage, and we'll look at that closer in a little bit. And while injured won't require surgery, he will be sidelined for 4 to 6 weeks with a throat injury. Honestly, sounds like a hockey injury. But now, quickly, this depth chart is starting to get a little thin. I mean, even without Tim Patrick on screen, no Kendall Hinton for a little bit, no Tyrie Cleveland. You just simply need guys to keep the drills and keep practice moving along. Insert Darrius Shepherd. So if you were looking for the Broncos to try and make a big blockbuster signing like a Will Fuller or T.Y. Hilton, that dream is not necessarily dead because of this signing, but maybe the Broncos ultimately want to give their own guys in camp an opportunity to step up and take over from Tim Patrick. But with some of those big names in mind, because a handful of you have commented, why don't we go out and sign Antonio Brown or Odell Beckham Jr.? Well, now is an opportunity to let me know what you think Denver should do. Should the Broncos sign a big-name wide receiver? Simply comment Y for yes or N for no. I'm curious what you have to say down in the comment section. Moving on to the injury side of things coming out of practice, safety J.R. Reed was escorted to the trainer/locker room today, according to Mike Klis, and that was probably the biggest, I wouldn't say name recognition-wise injury, but in terms of a severity and did not return, that was the case. Now, when you look at the safety depth chart here, J.R. Reed was always going to be a roster bubble player. He signed in free agency for his special teams contributions, and he was absolutely battling for a position spot. Hopefully he is okay and he can get back on the field soon. Now, there are some other players on the injury report as well. Caden Stearns, we stick it in the safety room. He got a hip injection today, so he just sat out of practice, which makes some sense if you get a hip injection. K'Waun Williams still dealing with that knee injury he suffered a couple of days ago. Now, the MRI came back negative on that, so at this point, it's August 4th. There's no reason to push it for your starting nickel corner. Kendall Hinton and Tyrie Cleveland, 2 receivers like we mentioned earlier, dealing with injuries. Cleveland a little bit more severe on that throat injury. I mean, Hackett in his press conference said, I had never even heard of what it was. So we got that going for Tyrie. And then Kendall Hinton dealing with a knee injury. Hopefully he can get back in action soon, especially with Patrick's targets and reps up for grabs. You know the rest of the depth chart is going to be battling for that. One injury I found somewhat interesting, or an interesting note to add to, is Greg Dulcich, right? The second pick for the Broncos in this past draft class after Nick Bonito. He got injured during OTAs, and Hackett's been pretty close to the chest on what the injury was, but he returned to practice and in style. He caught a touchdown pass from Russell Wilson. Great to see, because there's a lot of hope and belief that with Patrick down, it will be Dulcich and Albert Okwuegbunam stepping up as sort of a 1-2 punch in the red zone, because that's the big increase, I think, following Tim Patrick's injury, is who's going to step up and fill the void he had in the red zone. I mean, Patrick had 11 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. 7 of those touchdowns came in the red zone. Someone's got to step up and make those plays. Good opportunity and good candidate is Albert Okwuegbunam. He's got the size, he's got the build, like Dulcich. Hopefully we can see more impact from him closer to the goal line. But if you guys had to pick a tight end, who would you roll with, right? Dulcich was definitely Mr. Popular back in May and OTAs and into minicamp a little bit, but I think he might get punched in the mouth a little bit when it comes to blocking in the NFL. I mean, Okwuegbunam said himself, it took him 2 seasons to really get the blocking down, and now he feels a lot more comfortable in his game. Hopefully that will translate this season, but put the jersey number 80 or 85 for the tight end you think will be tight end 1 this season. Third and final story on today's show. Should the Broncos look to trade for Teven Jenkins? The Chicago Bears second-round pick from 2021 is reportedly / rumored to be on the trading block, as he missed most of last season with a back injury after getting surgery during training camp. You've got a new regime in Chicago who didn't draft Jenkins, right? They're not tied to him, and they are not in the sinking with him type of camp here, and they are open to shopping him because he has been MIA for the last week and change of training camp in Lake Forest, Illinois, and there's some belief it may not be an injury. It may be something more than that. It may be some character issues and the regime that was recently installed in Chicago not seeing eye to eye with the swing tackle. Now, last year, he did not play much. He had back surgery before the season started, joined late, so he didn't have much contributions, but we do have some PFF grades and stats to show you guys. He had an overall grade of 47.5. Yep, you guessed it. That's not good. Only 160 snaps, 7 penalties, and 2 sacks. He did not really make a good first impression with Chicago last year, but there's hope like any single second, top pick, they'll rebound after their rookie season. But when we look at this depth chart a little closer, Billy Turner, the presumed starting right tackle who was signed in free agency after he failed his physical with a knee injury with the Packers, is still on the PUP list. So Calvin Anderson has been getting all the first team reps at right tackle, essentially. He is the penciled-in starter until Turner returns. My question is, when is Turner going to return? Now, this has been a drum I've been beating for a while, and it's not that big of a deal in July to think about who your starting right tackle is. But once the season gets a little closer, then you start to highlight that a little bit more. So if the Broncos want to go out and make a trade for someone like Teven Jenkins, who was really highly regarded coming out of Oklahoma State. A lot of people liked him. He slipped out of the first round. Chicago jumped up and got him in round 2. And at the time, that was revered as a great pick, a bit of a steal. But once again, we go back to the big issue. The Broncos don't have a lot of assets to trade away, right? After losing their first and second round pick to Seattle, they are left with just 5 picks for the upcoming draft here. Does George Paton really want to trade another pick away for a dicey-ish player? I mean, our Chicago Bears now host here at Chat Sports, Harrison Graham, predicted that Jenkins might go for, say, a 4th-round pick. To the Broncos, that 4th-round pick feels more like a 3rd-round pick when you don't have a 1st or a 2nd. That's tough to part ways with. But at the moment, is Calvin Anderson really a good option to start week 1 at right tackle when he wasn't even the starter last year? I don't know, Jim, but I'll let you guys be the GM. Should the Broncos trade for Teven Jenkins? T for trade or P for pass? I'll give you my opinion in just a second, but I want you guys to sound off down below. Ultimately, I think it comes down to what the Bears are looking for. The Broncos likely cannot match, right? I don't think Chicago is going to move on for them their 2nd-round pick last year for a 5th, 6th, or 7th, right? They're going to want They're not going to find another second. They're probably not going to get a third. So fourth sounds about right. Broncos probably not in a good position to part ways with a fourth-round pick. They're already a little short, and Teven Jenkins hasn't proven that he is really close to starting in the NFL. All right, that's going to do it for us on today's show. Before we get on out of here, if you haven't followed me on Twitter yet, make sure you go ahead and do so at Matthew Petey. You can DM me if you got any questions about training camp or how things are going. DMs are always open, so slide on in at Matthew Petey.